Hello, hello, and welcome to Hygiene Elevated Conversations and Innovations. We are joined this evening by Miss Noriana Miscione. Did I say that correct again?
You did. I also have another last name prior, so I use both.
Perfect. What is that last name?
Missione.
Oh, Miscione. That's right. Perfect. Noriana, you have such a unique story. You reached out to me to be on the podcast for one reason, but we started having another conversation, and I was like, I want to hear your story as a hygienist. So I'm going to give you the floor to just kind of talk about your intro of being a hygienist and what your practice looks like right now. So you have the floor right now.
Well, thanks for having me. So I have been practicing since 2007. I graduated from a very small dental hygiene school in the middle of southern Georgia. Um, and I have practiced in multiple states, North Carolina, Georgia, Washington, and Idaho. I currently live in Boise, Idaho, and I travel on a weekly basis to Seattle, Washington to practice in a very advanced perio practice.
Now, you're not just like driving across the border from Idaho into Washington. You are flying from Boise into Seattle.
Yes, it's about an hour 15-minute flight depending on the weather.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm really racking up some great miles. Um, and really like getting to enjoy my time in the lounge as well, and eating good food that I don't have to cook. So, yeah, so I fly out usually Sunday afternoon, evening, and then I have a dear friend who lets me stay at her house so I can
Oh,
work. I work 5 days a week, like a block from where she lives, so I get to walk as well. So walking, flying, all the transportations, the light rail I get to take, occasionally a bus. Yeah.
that's awesome. So, when you and I had talked, when I first moved up to Utah 3 years ago, I was commuting back and forth between my former practice in New Mexico, rural New Mexico, to Utah. And I thought, what other hygienist in the world gets to commute? Thinking I was special. I was special because my office was paying for it, but I had just never heard of other hygienists commuting out of state to go to work like in such a significant amount of space. So why did you start commuting? Why how did this happen?
So I was previously with a very large perio practice, and my husband got relocated to Boise for work, and they actually had another hygienist within the group that lived in Boise, and they flew her back and forth. And they offered it to me, and I said, sure, this would be great. I would love to still keep my job, stay with my patients, and utilize the technology, and only have to be a wife on the weekends. And so I did that for a while, and it worked out great. I really enjoyed it. And then I started kind of getting like, oh, I kind of really want to live in Idaho and slow down. And I tried that for less than 6 months and realized it wasn't for me. I think, especially being around Washington's very progressive hygiene practice in general, like a lot of innovation, a lot of amazing hygienists. So I was just used to being surrounded by a blanket of knowledge. And when I came to Idaho, I felt like I was on my own island, and that was really hard for me. So I decided to, it's the hygiene market, right? This is my world. Why don't I go and find what I want again and fill this bucket of perio that I love so much? And so I approached one of the dentists, and said, "Hey, I want to come work for you. And they were like, oh, whoa, you're a little strong. And I said, I have the skill set. So let's talk. And I met with their HR. Not even a couple weeks later, I flew out, met one of the owner doctors, and by the end of the interview, I had the job. So it just worked. It was just checking all those boxes and filling my perio love. Um, and so I was like, you know what, I'll do it, but I'll do it on my terms. So I said, I'll come 2 weeks a month. I'll pick my weeks, and I'll make it work so I can be there in the need. You need a hygienist, right? And I need a job. And that way I'm also home for 2 weeks to do all the things that kind of the work-life balance, so I can enjoy my family. I can do things like this. And, so yeah.
Gosh. That's so crazy. The boldness that you have to approach, be like, look, you're gonna hire me and this is why. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I was really surprised too during my traveling. Like, I met another hygienist. She lives in Boise and she flies to Alaska and works. Yes. And so I was like, once again, I thought maybe it was just me and this other hygienist. I've met you, I've met her. I feel like we should start our own, club.
Art, the
I didn't
traveling
even know
RDH
this was
club.
like a thing on the West Coast. Like, I know the East Coast hygienists do this, like maybe because their states are so neighboring, right? It's
Tiny,
easy to just
tiny.
drive over and work. But I didn't know there was this community of hygienists flying out to go work on our side of the country. This is so cool.
West Coast,
I
West
also
Coast.
can't imagine what that's like to just pack your bag. And I mean, it's a lifestyle.
It really is, but it's also this, like, when I'm there, I just work. I could
Mhm.
care less about what's going on in the house, what I have to worry about. And so I get to completely separate to really be able, like, okay, I close the door on work. I'm going to go home and not worry about work. And then I got to close the home door and open the work door and solely give
Mhm.
120%. So it's, it works well for me.
Gosh, that's so unique. So why this practice? You were telling us a little bit before we got onto the podcast that this is like a high end perio practice. So tell us what that's like and why specifically you chose this practice.
Yeah, so I was Instagram stalking the one dentist and really um, was amazed how beautiful his grafting cases and just how he presented start to finish in his cases and educating. So that was one appealing moment that I was like, ooh, I would like to work for this guy. I could probably learn a lot, and he does beautiful work. Um, and then they also had a dental endoscope, which I had been utilizing in previous practice, which is a fiber optic camera. You insert it underneath the gum line, and on a monitor, you display the image magnified at about 50, 48, 50%. So you're actually seeing calculus and cleaning it simultaneously, which I feel like personally added some longevity to my body because I wasn't so hunched over like this and constantly heavy hand scaling. I was letting my Cavitron and piezo do the work. And I was seeing all the calculus that we miss, unfortunately, because we scale blindly. But also seeing decay and cement and weird enamel pearls and like just things we don't normally visually see underneath the gum line in real time. So they had that. The one doctor was teaches at a university. So it was just really appealing in the sense they had four doctors, two female, two male. So a little diversity. I liked that. And then they had such a big supportive clinical staff that I also really enjoyed. They had a clinical manager who runs the back. So that's a great support system when you're dealing with perio and bigger issues, bigger treatment plans, longer appointments. So I liked the support you also get there. So once again, I kicked my way through their door. And yeah, and one thing that I think as a hygienist that really, it wasn't like a deterrent, but it was definitely like, whoa, this hasn't happened since hygiene school, was they were checking my work. They wanted to make sure whoever they brought in had the skill set and was doing their job, because in perio, you're seeing the worst of the worst. You are saving teeth, and you're also longer appointments, higher fees. So that took me a little bit of an adjustment of more like, eat that humble pie. If I left a little calculus and, or a little plaque, they call me out, and that's okay, because it's just going to make me a better hygienist. And that's what we all, I think, strive for, is growing and learning. And I mean, I'd never used some instruments. I just did a course with Anna Pattison on her webinar platform, which was amazing. And I think everybody should take it, because I learned so much I thought I knew in 17 years of hygiene. So it's just pushing me to be better and striving for more.
Gosh, there's so many questions. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say in your daily routine, you have a perio maintenance. What does an appointment look like for you at your specialized perio practice?
Yeah, so I'm about 70 to 80 minutes. We do the health intake, blood pressure, probing, assessing all the bleeding. And even sometimes the beauty of me having a longer appointment is if somebody was a 3 millimeter pocket and they bump to a 5, I have time to anesthetize, and I have time to effectively get that back to health, or even bust out the dental endoscope. So I'm not rushed. It is polishing, still using the piezo, using a lot more hand instrument scaling. Like I said, instruments I'd not seen or used before too, and just being able to get the furcations and, these, unfortunately, like we know there's no cure, right? So just trying to do what we can to maintain and keep these teeth for the remaining of these people's lives so they can chew, talk, function, is our goal. So allowing that extra time and spending more time on OHI, like, okay, grab the mirror. Here we are going to go with the proxy brush, and we size everybody with tepe brushes. So, okay, here's your color codes, and this is what goes where. And just having that time, right, to build that relationship, and not these 60 or 40 or even 20-minute hygiene appointments I hear people are, running into. And we know when a patient is at a perio practice too, like the light bulb switches for them. They're like, oh, what? I'm gonna die and lose my teeth? I can't do that, right? So their mindset is super unique, and then
they're engaged.
They're so engaged, and they're like, they're in there too, like, oh, this one spot was bleeding and it was a day and a half, and like they're just so detailed on what they report because they're vested.
So you have like all type A personality patients.
Mostly, yes. There are some, yeah. Yeah, there's some interesting, and you also get the patients that some people can't handle, so they just send you to the perio office. They're like, I can't, this person's crazy. So we get a lot of those too, but they tend to tone out with us because we don't tolerate that. Like, you want us to save your teeth. This is the game plan, right? Like, yeah. You will lay back because I can't do my job unless you lay back. And I know if you lay in a bed, we can recline this chair a little bit more for you, Yeah,
oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
Like,
So I'm like, how do you get in bed? How do you do it?
yeah.
You know, I just love listening to you talk about this because it's this world that I don't know about. I have never used an endoscope with my perio cases.
Me
And when you're
either.
talking about all of the stuff you can see, I am like incredibly envious for one, but I'm also thinking about like, wow, how much more efficient we could work if we could see everything, right? Like, are we overscaling? Could I have saved myself a few minutes on that pocket if I could have visually seen it was clean already and moved on? So I just think that is fantastic, like super, super cool. I was also thinking about when you talked about the doctors coming in to check the work. And I thought, my hygiene brain is like, wow, that's like school, right? They're coming in to check your work. But then my consumer brain is like, wow, I would love to have like know from the doctor this was perfect. Like I think, and when you guys are fee for service, that is how they feel that they've spent their money well, right? And
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
so yeah, you'd have to switch your mindset though. Like the hygiene brain is like terrified because it's school, right?
Yep. Yep.
Your consumer brain tells you like, wow, that is actually an incredible service that's being offered to the patient.
And the beauty of it is somebody's like, oh, well, the dentist doesn't clean teeth. Well, these dentists do. They scale and do surgery and remove as much calculus as I'm removing, right? Like they know the anatomy more than a general dentist in a sense, right? Underneath the gum line. So, I mean, I fully trust them. Like, oh, there's a spot. Go back. I feel it. Okay, I'm gonna go back and feel it too. And I'll just get my camera and look. Oh, yep, there it is, right? Like,
Wow.
and the technology's been around for about 20 years, the dental endoscope. It's been around a long time.
I feel like I have missed out so much on this because I cannot function without my intraoral camera. Like trying to do patient education, anything, I just feel like I'm practicing with one hand tied behind my back if my camera isn't working. So I couldn't imagine knowing this technology exists, utilizing it, and then, going and temping at another office and not having it. You're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
it
gosh.
is. And that's like why when I was in Idaho, nobody had one in Boise. Or they did, but they were like an older version and they were sitting in a closet and they didn't see the potential. And here I am, like, sole believer and being like, we can avoid so many surgical procedures. I can get in a 9 millimeter pocket and I'll clean it because I can see it, right? I mean, I thought I could clean it too when I couldn't see it because I was that confident, but there was no way, knowing what I know now, utilizing the technology, like, nope, there was burnished calculus. I left that burnished calculus. I did, because I thought it was smooth, or I couldn't see what you're doing. You're just like, do do do. Is the root smooth? Do do do. It's always still at the CEJ. So yeah, and there's no way I could go continuous in my career without utilizing one, right? Because once again, it's like if you had your intraoral camera taken away, it's like, right?
And that's probably me with a laser. I'm like, oh, that's like a must. I have to have one now. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the laser. So, what kind of software do you use? Like, does the endoscopy like kind of plug into USB like an intraoral camera, or is it a little bit different? How does that integrate?
So there's different versions out there. There's a newer model that's out. It is like Windows operating unit. So it's an actual computer and you can record and take images and put it in the patient's chart. The older models, it is just literally like a control box and you turn it on, you look at your fiber, and the image, whatever you're looking at, is what's projected on the screen.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Interesting. So, do you submit to insurance sometimes through these? Is that why you record in a patient chart?
So if you definitely wanted to do that because of the perio, or if you saw decay underneath a crown margin that's not showing up on an x-ray, that's another thing you could utilize. When you're a referring doctor, right, the perio will say, oh, there's decay, or here's the cement I cleaned off, and just send it back. So maybe you know, or endoperfs. So if we see an endoperf, the gutta purchase perfing out, it doesn't typically show up on an x-ray, but that's a great indicator to just let the general dentist know to keep an eye on it. Like they might not be symptomatic, but it's still open. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but it's usually decay is the biggest one. Because too, when we're submitting for insurances for any scaling, I mean, our perio measurements and our x-rays are going to be really what they're going to look at. They probably wouldn't really know what the picture is either, you know? So
what's the learning curve with that camera?
yeah. So every hygienist is different. I self-taught myself. So I would say it took me a few months to master it because you're using your mirror hand to hold your Explorer fiber and then your Cavitron. So you're using two hands, 2 feet, because the camera has a little water line to keep the field of image clean that you're constantly kind of, or like if you remove calculus, it kind of flies in your vision. So you just put a little water, and then your Cavitron or piezo pedals also water. So it's a little bit like learning, oh, which foot pedal am I gonna connect with what hand, right? And then also looking at the screen because we're used to looking in the mouth. So at first I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, it's because I'm not looking up. So there is a definitely learning curve. I mean, I always tell everybody distals are still distals. They're hard, but you can see what you're trying to get off now. And then, patient management or like tori or limited opening, there's always going to be kind of that you have to combat around. But practice makes perfect. So the more you do it, the more it's going to be second nature, just like when we learned our hand instruments and our Gracies, it's kind of like going back and even the different Cavitron tips and piezo. So I learned with Cavitron tips and now I'm using piezo tips. So I hadn't used piezo in a long time. So even just maneuvering like, oh, where's my tip at? I can't see it. Oh, because it's not the same curvature. I'm used to using like a left and right. So, but once you see it and you see the power of it, you are like, I want to do this on everybody. Everybody needs this. I don't care if you have a 3mm pocket. I'll find calculus on you. We'll find it. And a lot of this, there's actually quite a few colleges like USC is a big one. They use it to help during their education platform to show where we miss calculus. There's a good, I would say at least 10 colleges that I know have it in the clinic off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can only imagine how amazing that would be. So where was your first experience with this camera?
So it was at the perio office. So I was starting to get burnt out. Year 13 of hygiene is a big burnout year. I was temping and I was trying to find, I don't know, like respark my love for hygiene because I was the hygienist crying to work and crying on the way back because we go through these phases. And I had gone to a CE component course and I had known this hygienist and she'd been in the community a long time and she worked at this perio practice. And so I sat next to her and I was like, oh, how's your office going? You know, what's going on? And she's like, oh, we got this thing and I just don't know. I might be too stuck in my ways. And I said, well, what is this thing? Because, you know, I wanted to know what you were doing. And she said, oh, it's called the perioscopy. And I remember sitting there being like, my brain going like, I remember reading an article 5 or 6 years ago in RDH magazine, and I remember reading about this. This exists. People have this. And she just happened to mention like, oh, we're growing because we got purchased by a larger perio group, and the doctor's going to be retiring, and there's a young doctor coming on. And that next day, I pushed my way into that office and I was like, I need to work for you. And this is why I want to learn this. And that's how it went. So you just manifest like what you want in life. And I wanted to be the hygienist that knew what everybody had. And that's what I loved about temping. It was like, oh, I know your software. I've seen this before. Or I didn't want to be the hygienist was like, oh, do you know what this scaler is? This Queen of Hearts, right? Like, ooh, nope, never seen it before. So that's why I think I push myself for these jobs, is because I don't want to have the FOMO in hygiene, right? Like,
I love that.
Oh, I love you. The more we talk, I love it.
Same.
Well, and you see all this social media too, and you're like, what? Like, even when the EMS GBT, I was like, I need it. I got to have it. Who has one? Like, I got to play with it. I got to make friends with the rep. Like, and that's...
So do you implement GBT in your perio office?
So we have the EMS airflow polisher. We don't have their piezo. So that's next on our wish list, just because the tips that they have are more perio friendly, implant friendly, restoration friendly, and the fact the water temperature is, you know, nobody will complain. The water came from Alaska. So it's just, yeah, so that's on my wish list. I'll ask for it for Christmas.
I'm sure you're gonna get it. You seem
Yeah.
like if you want it, you're gonna have it.
I mean, especially with the clientele that you have, like they want the latest and greatest is what it sounds like. They're going to get it. So have you, in all of your experiences, have you ever written for RDH magazine or anything about perio endoscopy?
No.
Why not?
Mm-mm. I've read a lot of their articles on it, but I don't know. That would be probably out of my comfort zone, because if you read something I wrote, you'd be like, what planet is she on? She's talking here and there and there. I would need like an editor and like someone to guide me, you know, like back in school. But
You just said you like to push yourself. So I think that this is up your alley. I think this is next on Noriana's to-do list.
maybe my future holds like, oh.
Well, Amanda and I can introduce you to Jackie Sanders, the editor of the RDH magazine. And she will help you. She has an amazing team of editors.
Yes.
I mean, all those articles that come out just keep me informed, and I love it, and so I don't have FOMO. Like,
that's awesome. So, okay, on the subject of kind of continuing education and your FOMO, what would you say like you specifically look for when you're doing continuing education? Do you focus on perio, or are you just like, give me the latest and greatest of everything and I'm going to implement it? How do you seek that out?
ooh, great question. I think a lot of it is more like what I'm seeing on social media and Instagram, other influencers like with their products or what they utilize in their office, and they'll post the little link and it'll send me to either Cloud Dentistry or Young or, you know, all these other links. But I think I will always go to everything because of the FOMO. Whether I implement it or not is maybe because I don't utilize those things in practice, right? But it's nice to know. So when I'm talking to a patient, like, oh, maybe your general dentist has this because this is the latest and greatest for you, and you should ask them because this would really benefit for you, right? Or this new brush came out and you have to order it directly from the company, but it's worth it, XYZ. So I think just that, and also like definitely like I'm always going to go to Katrina Sanders, right? Because the wine hygienist is all her knowledge is so great and she's so upbeat about it. Like it never feels boring, right? It never feels like, oh gosh. I love sharpening classes. I love hands-on laser classes. I've been to a few. Those are always fun. Laser the hot dog. And, so I really love more hands-on, but I think in the way we are right now, it's more like Zoom and fly by. But yeah, so I probably did 300 CEs last year, if
Oh,
not
wow.
more. Hmm.
Holy moly.
Any component I will like support if they post it on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, I'll go to your component meeting via Zoom. And
Okay, that's the definition of FOMO. If you have 300 CEs.
I know. I'm like, I thought I overachieved with 100 last year. With all the webinars. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that.
but too,
300?
when you hold multiple state licensures, like right now I'm down to 2, but I used to maintain all 4, like keeping up with what needed what and what counted at what. So I was like, I'm just going to take it all. And if I get audited, I'm covered. Right.
That's safe. That's safe.
So let's see, I can't remember, it might have been 2 years ago at Under One Roof. Amanda and I did a CE course that Katrina Sanders taught on staging and grading. And she's just brilliant and hilarious and funny and all those great things, but she made sense. And I don't know how many people just didn't pick up on staging and grading the first time they heard it. So, I mean, I had heard it, trying to implement it, but listening to her speak on it, I'm like, oh, duh, get it now. Like, she's a great speaker.
She has a way, and all that information stays in my brain, right? Like that's the beauty of it, is like her voice comes out, her and her wine glass and her dog, and I'm like, oh, that's right, she told me this once and this is what it should be. So
that's funny. Okay, so as somebody who has 300 credit hours of continuing education, what would you think, or what kind of trends do you see are going to kind of help shape the future of hygiene, like the technology aspect of things?
Yeah, I think definitely AI is going to continue and it's going to advance. And I mean, it'll be where you don't even use a wand or even x-rays. Who knows? You just go and it gets scanned and it gives you this printout. And I think too, also, like we are doing more whole body. We are talking about the microbiome. I think we'll see a little bit of a different trajectory because we've had so many overexposure for all these chemical properties. Now we're seeing the, you know, effect. So I think people taking more initiative and really going out of their way to figure out what's truly wrong with them, and getting down to the root cause, I think we'll have to keep up with that demand, right? Like, okay, saliva testing's good, but your saliva test only does XYZ.
So much. I am so with you on this. I am so with you on this.
And we can't just dash everybody with antibiotics. So what are we doing to give the patient the benefit, right? Like, how do we serve them? I think, with technology, there's things that come and go. The scanner, I'm in love with any scanner where I can talk about form, function, and bite and alignment. And now how we're doing more airway and myofunctional. I think that's going to stay on a trend. Yeah, so I think all things technology will keep advancing, and we're as hygienists wanting that, right? we want something different. Like, make me a scaler where I never have to sharpen it. We're getting there, right? So I think as long as we keep doing what we do, advocating for ourselves and seeking out companies that listen to us, I mean, state of the art will surpass medical one day.
I love everything that you just said. I am definitely with you on the root cause, because how frustrating is it as providers, we see patients and we know, okay, you keep getting decay, like, and it's a whole family issue. Golly gee, maybe it's your lifestyle, maybe it's something more, and it's causing systemic issues that's reflecting in your oral health. And yes, you Prevident can only do so much.
Yeah. And too, the patient's mindset is changing as we are just making them more aware, or the words getting out that they saw something on social media
Yes.
that can, like, that is a blessing and a curse of social media. But
Yes, no, very true. Very true.
it opens a door and conversation with patients.
No, I think definitely I agree with that statement. Like, social media has prompted so many great conversations with patients, and so many, like, no, do not ever do that. Do not ever listen to that person on TikTok.
No
Conversation.
oil pulling.
Whoa,
No
shots
switching with bleach.
fired. I'm actually writing an article this week on oil pulling. Yeah, look for it in the April issue of RDH magazine.
Oh, I cannot wait, Amanda.
Me either. We'll see what happens. I had a week to do it, so I think I had another question. Joffrey, do you have another question while I'm thinking of what I was going to ask?
Okay, so I do have a question, and I want to kind of take it back to the traveling from Idaho all the way to Seattle. I know, like, your heart is for the best care for your patients, but is it also due to the, like, compensation being higher in Seattle?
100%. I think, and I'll go back, like, I worked in Georgia, the wages were great for the market there, right? And you're living. And then once you go to Washington and live there and get used to the wages, it's really hard to go back in time. Whether it's more like, ooh, I worked really hard in my professional career to make this much money. And now it's like, shoes still cost the
That's
same.
a good point. I haven't thought about that.
And so for me, it was more like a career thing. Like, am I not successful because I'm not making the same amount of money? Like, and I think even here, it wasn't, because the money was fair. Wages are always increasing. It takes some time, and some hygienists being adamant about it and fighting for us before it changes. But it's starting to change in Idaho, definitely. But it was definitely, yes, that was a factor. That definitely was a factor.
Yeah.
And but it was also my love of perio and where I want to be in perio. I want to strive and find the best of the best because I want to be a part of that team. So for me, it was a little bit of both.
Now,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Amanda. I know, like, no two private practices are the same. No two root canal specialists will run their practice the same. No two periodontists are going to be the same. And I'm wondering what you feel about that, because I recently had a case where, we're talking about tooth number 27, and I could, like, my probe just falls right in, and I'm like, yeah, no, this isn't for me. Like, I don't feel confident I have the tools to clean this pocket. If my probe can't read it, like, I can't reach it, like, type of a feeling. So we had sent this patient to a periodontist, and the local periodontist they just did scaling and root planing. Like there was no extra stuff. And I was really hoping for this patient, because I'm like, oh, maybe they can add some bone. Maybe they're going to like open flap the area and clean it out. And they had done what sounded like something I could have tried to have done. And it left me like a little sad for that moment, right? Because I'm like, oh, I really wanted to push you in this direction to get like the best, the best. So anyways, what's your take on like the different ways periodontal offices can operate?
Yeah, so you're gonna see the conservative, which will always rescale. And I always think like they have a little bit more of a tool set, and they also are used to seeing this. So their mindset is like, oh, we can get this cleaned up, probably resolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the conservative. And that's what we always tend to want to go to first before going straight into surgery, and seeing how much will it heal, and then how much bone is really lost. Take a CBCT. That would be a good indicator too. Like, oh, no, there's so much bone loss. Let's go straight into surgery. So I think it just depends. Once again, different dentists, different philosophies, conservative, aggressive, advanced, not advanced. But I think one thing I really encourage hygienists to refer is open that line of communication with your referring dentist, not challenging him, but just being like, why did you do this on this case? And how should I handle that better when I'm referring to your office? Like, what would you guys do? Like, because if you're referring these patients because you're trying to save their teeth, you want to know that you're putting them in the best of care and they're going to get a good outcome. So I think just communication, like study clubs with, and a lot of periodontists will do this with their referring office, and just open that communication so they know when you want to refer, what you want to refer, how you want to handle it. And there's been plenty of times that I've had hygienists call the office and it's like, I'm going to refer a patient. Will you guys think about surgery first because it is a severe case? And also we see that stuff all day long, right? So your severe is like our okay, we can handle this, right? On that different like playing fields. We're like, oh yeah, we see tooth hanging out all the time. Like, we clean those wiggly ones. So, but I think just open and honest communication with your referring practice, I think, because then I think will also value when you do refer to them, right? And then also their communication opens up better with you on their documentation back to you.
That's a fabulous idea. I've never thought about networking with the doctors that we're referring to. It's always kind of just been the doctor that I work with, right? They have their own network of who they like to refer to. And I never thought of putting myself in that network bubble. I just never thought about it. So what
You just push your way in, girl. Push your way in.
It's the Noriana way. Elbow it in. Stalk on social media and elbow your way in. You'll get everything. I love
it. No, your story is so insightful and I think really inspiring for somebody who might be dealing with that issue of moving states and having to figure out, where do I go from here, or working with the best technologies and never actually stopping. That FOMO is going to keep you going forever.
Be 99 still ridiculous.
Still going to CEs.
Yeah.
For sure. Down to 2 state licenses and not 4. Yeah. It's compromise. Okay, I'm curious. So as somebody who has, quite a armamentarium of instruments, what is your favorite go-to instrument?
Ooh. I really love a Queen of Hearts. I think just the name alone, just by PDT, is one of my favorites. It's just double-bladed long. I can't just pick one. So I'll pick like a good top 4 or 5.
Okay.
So Queen of Hearts.
Let's hear it.
A Nevi 2. Love the
Okay.
curve. 4R4L. And a 1718 Gracie.
I don't think I've ever used a 1718.
Best on those distals, just curvy.
But the 4R4L, I've never used that.
Oh.
So I didn't use that until I moved to Washington, because in Georgia and North Carolina, everybody did a Barnhart 5.6.
Yeah, that's what I grew up on.
Yeah. So
I had both. I do like a 4R4L.
Interesting. What a good deck of cards you have there. I like that.
Starting with the Queen of Hearts.
Yes.
yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So you mentioned when we were talking about your travel, you have kind of an interesting schedule. How do you kind of maintain that at-home balance versus, it's kind of interesting because you're gone for 2 weeks solid. Like, do you come home on the weekends?
Yeah. So I come home on the weekend
Okay.
and I fly in Friday night. I wake up early. I do all the laundry, all the house cleaning, and get it just done, right? So I can just relax, get caught up on some shows, have some family time because I still have one kiddo at home, and do the grocery shopping, and then we just like chill and hang out. And then Sunday I fly out, and then I have a thank you Google for amazing calendars, because I have a color coded calendar. So when I'm home for the week, I have any appointments scheduled, anything I need to get done that week, and just prioritize. And that week, I'm just going to do as much as possible to enjoy my weekend home. And so I think just it took me a while to figure that out, instead of like, oh, I can just do everything one day a month, and realizing, oh no, that doesn't work out. You need to like make time. Like today, my husband was off. We went to the jewelry store. We went and ate tacos. I had a PT appointment. Like, just all these things to also have a relationship with your spouse. And like, you're going to
Yeah.
come on my errands with me. And we're going to spend time. And
Adult
then,
life.
yeah. But then also like, oh, this is my kid's time. So what does my kid want to do? Like, you want to go to the Nerf gun place? Let's go. You want to go to a movie? Whatever. Because I'm gone all week, and you're probably living the best life on video games, right? Like, so.
That's true. Gosh. Yeah, I'm just like flashing back, whatever, to when I was commuting, because I was a newlywed. I think I lived in Utah 2 weeks before I started to have to commute back to New Mexico. And I would leave Monday night. My husband would drop me off at the airport, and I would work Tuesday, Wednesday, and fly home Thursday night. And I would be home for like that 4-ish days. And it was so weird as a newlywed, like going back to your home state and working. And then like, it was like living 2 lives. It was super weird, but it
It
was a
is.
fun adventure. But it was just like, I do not want to do this long term.
See, and I thrive on it because I also like have such a good friend group in Washington from when I lived there. So like, I'm like, what's somebody doing? I'm in town. Let's go to the symphony, or let's go, I don't know, arts and crafts something. So so that's a nice kind of like balance where I just get that good friend time that we need as women.
That does sound like a best of both worlds situation that you have. So it sounds like you have found your unicorn office.
They do exist, people. They do. They do.
I knew it. I knew they were out there. The travel lifestyle is something I'm recently adapting by traveling to the hygiene schools and presenting to their classes before graduation. And so just this month, I'm going to be going to Colorado for a day, and then going to New Mexico for a day.
Woo-hoo!
And yeah, and I've really been trying to plan mine where I fly in the morning, present in the afternoon, fly back. So it just seems like I was just at work all day and that the family doesn't even know I was gone. That is my travel goal. I know it won't always work out that way, but it's very interesting trying to book flights and rental cars for all these various cities and
timing of what comes when and when you want to get there.
yeah.
But you should make a point of doing something fun while you're in these cities, because you don't want to look back and say, I've been to 50 cities, and people are like, well, did you go to the park? There's a famous park there. And you're like, what? I didn't even know. So you should definitely take advantage of seeing the
I will
sights.
take your advice.
I love that
find
advice.
my favorite restaurant.
Yes.
In every city.
I love it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're going to wrap up with our final two questions. Okay, Noriana, what do you wish you would have learned in school that took you years to learn as an RDH?
Ooh. So when I went to school in Georgia, we did not give anesthetic at all. And so obviously right now they just are allowed to, and it's amazing, and it's like about time. But I got 4 days of training with Kathy Bassett, which was great. Kathy is amazing. But it was like, whoosh, and then that was it, right? And I didn't have, I mean, thankfully there's a teacher Tina out there too for the world, because I mean, I was like, am I even know what I'm really doing with 4 days? I passed the board, but do I know? I haven't done this enough. So I think I wish I would have learned anesthetic in hygiene school and gotten all that practice and those nerves and that confidence out instead of, you're 13, 14. So yeah. And yeah, I think that would be the biggest one.
That's a very reasonable answer. I couldn't imagine not learning in school something like anesthesia and then trying to implement that in practice. Like that would be so scary, not having all that clinic time to practice, on your classmates that are a little bit more forgiving. So I haven't honestly thought about that, where that would put you in just comfort of delivering anesthesia.
Well, yeah, and you're like out of the student zone. Like you're a professional now. Like you'd have to put yourself back in student mode. And I'm like so checked out from being a student. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want another textbook in front of me at all. So yeah, what a challenge to have to. But you're right. There are women or people like Teacher Tina to help everybody out.
Yeah.
Who's
And
wonderful,
all the
by the
tips
way.
and tricks.
The last question I want to ask you is, what piece of advice do you wish you could go back and give yourself as a new grad?
Ooh. I think a few things. They always said like, oh, work your first job and stay there because you want to be, stable and keep that first job till forever. No, nope. You should try all the jobs because you don't know what fits for you. And then you might be in a really toxic work environment that then takes a toll on you, and that's not fair to you. So I think avoiding the toxic, like there's no rule that says you have to work somewhere, right? Like you're choosing to work somewhere. It should be a healthy environment, it should be a nurturing environment, and you should have a great supportive team, and be the best sports team almost, and not the crazy kind of, it should. So avoid the toxic offices and you'll go far.
I could not agree more.
Beautifully said.
Well, that wraps up our episode, Noriana. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us and share your story with us and educating us on your technology that you implement. I loved it. I am excited to maybe one day get to implement it in my practice.
Yeah, or you could just come over to Seattle and we can hang out for the day and I'll teach it to you. And
That would
then
be fun.
you can
That would be
tell
fun.
your doctor to buy one. But yeah,
Hey, well,
thank
when
you
I
so
go
much.
to some schools in Seattle, Washington area, we'll see if you're working that week. Maybe we'll catch
That'd
dinner.
be so much fun. Yes, and we'll find that fun restaurant. So
Yes.
that way you can put that on your bucket list. Yes, I'm so
Fantastic.
thankful
And I
for
have
you
a feeling
guys.
we're gonna bump shoulders at some CE course one of these days.
I think so. Maybe RDH under one roof.
Yes.
We'll
We'll
be
have
there.
a booth. We'll have a booth. So you have to stop and see us.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yes.
All right, Noriana, have a good evening.
Thanks so much. You guys have a great night.